So I'm going to show you how I make my menopause cake. Now this really started as a bit of fun. It's kind of an icebreaker. You know, you can take it round to a girlfriend's house, you could have it at work, you could share it with your family, and people say, "Ooh, menopause cake, what's that?" And it kind of starts the conversation. Now this is not going to sort out all your menopause symptoms for sure, but it is super tasty, it's low sugars, and it does contain some healthy phytoestrogens. So if you're looking to increase your phytoestrogens in your diet through things like flax seeds, for example, and soya, I'm using soya milk and soya flour, then this is a good way to give that a little bit of a boost. So it's really simple. There are lots of different versions that you can try actually. The one that's in my Good Menopause Guide, that is called the Meno Tea Loaf. And you can see it's a little bit kind of like a toasted loafy bread, like a dried fruit bread. That's a really nice one to make. And then the one that I'm going to do today is actually on the Earle Wellbeing website. So I've got it here on my iPad to refresh my memory, but it's really simple. I'm using some spelt flour, but if you wanted to make it gluten-free, then you could use a gluten-free flour, that's absolutely fine. So I've got 100 grams of that in the bowl, and then I'm going to add to that some soya flour. So the soya flour, of course, is the one that has the phytoestrogens. So that is going to go in with my regular flour. And then into that, I am also going to add some oats. So I've got another 100 grams of rolled oats. So this texture, I have to say, is quite heavy. It's not a light sponge. It's not a delicate little cake. It's really quite a substantial thing that you can have on its own. You can have it buttered. You can toast it. It toasts really well. It also freezes really well. So if you want to slice it and keep slices in the freezer, then that's a really good thing to do. You can then pop them in the toaster, or you can just serve it slice by slice. So it's the kind of thing that I tend to have in my freezer, to be honest, to pull out, you know, whenever I feel like something that's really quite substantial and so tasty, because you can see some of the good things that I'm adding. So I'm going to add some flax seeds. Now, the thing with flax seeds is you do need to grind them. So you can buy flax seeds that have already been ground, but I like to actually grind my own, which is what I've done here. I've just used a food processor and whizzed them up, because what that does is it cracks open the seed, and that actually makes the goodness inside them much more absorbable. Otherwise, they just pass straight through you. So I've got my cracked flax seeds, also known as linseeds. Same thing. Mix that all up together. Then I'm also using some flaked almonds, one of my favorite ingredients for baking, and some sesame seeds. So really good mixture here. Sesame seeds, lots of calcium, really healthy seeds. And as you can see, I have lightly toasted them. So I just put those onto a baking tray, pop them in the oven, or you could fry them off in a dry frying pan, just so that they toast just a little bit, just to improve the flavor. You don't want them to burn at all. So watch them like a hawk when you've got them in the heat. So I'm gonna mix those in. And then I am going to add, normally I'd use sunflower seeds, run out of sunflower seeds, so I'm going to use pumpkin seeds. So, you know, you can really mix and match. As I say with a lot of my recipes, they're not super prescriptive. Just use something similar or something that you like especially. Then I am going to add my dried fruits. Now I'm going to use for sweetness some pitted dates. So this gives us quite a lot of prebiotic fiber, as well as the sweetness of the dates. So I've just chopped those. So again, you could chop all your dried fruit in a food processor if you wanted to. You could do the whole thing in a food processor if you wanted to. I'm just doing it in a bowl here so that you can see, and so it doesn't make too much noise for my filming. Then I'm also going to add some raisins. That's also good for sweetness. Where are my raisins? Here are my raisins. So pop those in, not too many. Again, don't forget, dried fruits are really high in sugars. So I'm just using just enough for the sweetness, because I'm not actually adding any extra refined sugar here. What I am doing though is going to use a little bit of honey. So I've got my honey here. And you can use runny honey, or you can use set honey. I've got some set honey. I'm going to use two tablespoons. And that will all mix together. When you're buying honey, try and get local honey if you can. Support your local beekeepers. Just check the label. Sometimes it'll say produce of more than one country. It'll be a blend of EU and non-EU honeys. You know, try and get the real deal if you can from somewhere local. Then I'm also going to add into that some dried apricots. Now I've got two types to show you. So normal dried apricots, which are chopped here, I say normal, these are the kind of the commercial ones, and they're bright orange in colour. The reason that they're bright orange is that they are preserved with sulfur dioxide, and that can be a sensitizer for some people. It can be a trigger. And actually, if you don't have to have sulfur dioxide, don't have it. So I always try and get these slightly darker ones. They don't look as good, but they are, frankly, I think, a nicer option. So you can see there, they haven't been dried with sulfur dioxide. So they don't quite look as appetizing, which I think is why the food processors tend to preserve them using sulfur dioxide. Anyway, I've chopped those lightly. So they're going to go into my bowl. And then a couple of little added ingredients to make this quite spicy. So I'm going to use cinnamon. Cinnamon is a really interesting spice, and it's been shown to help lower sugar cravings. So it also has all kinds of other interesting medicinal properties. There's my dried cinnamon. Here we go. So I'm going to use two, should I take the lid off, 2 healthy teaspoons. I love cinnamon, so I'm going to use 2 really generous heaped teaspoons of dried cinnamon. And then I'm going to use the same of ginger. Gosh, I'm nearly at the end of this. I think we'll just about get our 2 teaspoons out of here. There we go, 2 teaspoons, let's finish that off, of dried ginger. I'm also going to use stem ginger, crystallized stem ginger. And again, that's really for sweetness and also for texture, because I think it's really nice to layer textures into this cake. So that's just about all mixed in. You can really smell the spices actually coming up from the mixture. And then this is the stem ginger. So I've chopped it here. You buy it in jars, and then what you need to do is just sort of chop it into small chunks. And it really is so delicious in a loaf like this, because when you bite into it, all of a sudden you'll get this, wow, real tang of ginger. And of course, if you don't like ginger, you can leave it out, but I think it's a really nice thing to add in. Add a little bit of the syrup there, just a tiny bit. Okay, so now I'm going to use soya milk for the liquid. And I'm going to use about 650 grams, something like that, 650 mils. The thing with this cake is because it's really absorbent, it's always good to do it in 2 batches. So I'm going to start. So this is just a basic unsweetened soy milk. So you don't want to add in the extra sugars. So I'm going to use most of that in there. You know, if you're not so bothered about the phytoestrogens, and you know, frankly, the jury's still out really as to whether they genuinely help, but it's a good talking point. And yeah, there may be some benefit to it. So, you know, why not if you want to try that? But you can make it with regular milk. That's not going to be a problem. So mix this together. Now, because I've got so many different types of flours, I've got the soya flour, I've got the spelt, I've got the ground linseeds or flax seeds in here, then this is going to absorb all the liquids. So what I suggest you do is I suggest that once you've stirred all this together, you actually leave it for 15-20 minutes. And then you'll see that it really thickens, and you may at that stage want to add a little bit more of the soya milk, because what you want is you want it to be that kind of dropping consistency. But as I say, it will really kind of almost solidify. So what I'm going to do now, just ahead of that, is I will add a little bit more, because I know what it's like, because I've made this so often. So I know that it will absorb. And then the whole thing is going to bake in the oven for about an hour. Keep an eye on it, you don't want it to burn, obviously. It's around, I think it's around 160 degrees, which if I look at my little ready reckoner, it will tell you. So again, you'll find the recipe on the Earle Wellbeing website. There'll be a link just below here. Oh, it's 190 degrees, so that's 375 degrees Fahrenheit or gas mark 5. Obviously you can adjust it. If you've got a fan oven, then it will be a little bit less for the cooking time. So there is my mixture, and then I'm going to make it into a loaf, just because I think it's more of a loaf than a cake, really. I mean, you can make it as a cake, there's no problem. But into this, I've already greased the sides, and then I'm just going to add some greaseproof paper just around the edges, just so I can be really sure that it comes out easily when it's cooked. So put those in there like that, and then I can tip the mixture in. And this should, if I'm lucky, fill the whole tin. Let's see if we've got that. There we go. Yeah, look at that. It's a great colour. It's the soya that gives it that colour, and also the ground flax seeds. So I shall put that in there like that, just smooth that down, and then that can be popped into the oven, which I've already got preheated. So I'm going to pop that in, and then over here it's going to go in like that. In time-honoured tradition, here's one I made earlier. Now you do need a sharp knife to cut this, so I obviously haven't cut this, so let's see what it looks like. I like the end because it's slightly crispy, but you can always trim that off if you want to. But do you see how incredibly moist and dense that is? It's almost like a traditional malt loaf. So you've got all the goodness going on here of the flax seeds, you've got the stem ginger, you've got the dates. It is really delicious. You can eat it just like this. You can cut it into little chunks. It's so nutritious. It's really moreish. So if you're planning a packed lunch or a picnic, you're traveling, it's so filling to take that with you. Again, toasted with butter, it's delicious, or just plain toasted. And if you're going to freeze it, my suggestion would be to slice it before you freeze it, and then you can just pop it into a container or a bag, keep it in the freezer, and then you've got it always there ready whenever you want a slice of your menopause cake. I hope you enjoy.